Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Up My Hockey. And if you are new to the program, you have a great one today. And if you are a veteran listener, we're going to cover something new today. And we're interviewing Dave Michaud. Dave Michaud is the owner and president of the Port Alberni Bulldogs. The Port Alberni Bulldogs are a team in the BC Junior Hockey League, which is one of the best developmental leagues and one of the playgrounds for aspiring Division I college athletes. A lot of the players from the BC Junior League go on to play in the NCAA. A lot of them go on to Canadian University, and many go on to the NHL as well. And Dave is an owner and president of a team there. Dave's story is super compelling. He is really a testament to being part of the process, being putting in the work, and the relationship side of the game. He started in the Okanagan Valley here as a color guy for the Kelowna Rockets. We covered that, how he got involved in that. He then transitioned into being a GM of a major midget program, which then transitioned him into being on the agent side of the business with CAA, with working for names like JP Barry and Pat Brisson, who are big names in the agency world of the NHL level. And then he got into being involved with the Penticton Vees in the BC Junior Hockey League, where he was director of player development and also on the corporate side of sales, which positioned him to take on his new role, which is now owner and president of the Port Alberni Bulldogs. So every step of the way, Dave was learning something. Dave was putting tools in his toolbox, and he was committed to making himself better so he can now serve his team the best he can. This is a great episode for anyone who's interested about the BC Junior League, who's interested about the recruitment side of putting together a hockey team, about how you build a culture as a team and what he's looking for. And really, it's great to hear about the relationship side of the game and how important relationships are within the game, and how it is such a relationship-driven sport, and how we build trust with people, and how we build accountability and integrity. And Dave does a lot to share his perspective on that and how he's building things there in Port Alberni. So I learned a lot from this episode, from this interview. Dave is a great guy. I love rags to riches is the wrong way to put it, but just put in the work, learn the skill, learn his craft, develop the relationships in the network, and now he's responsible for a Junior A program in one of the best developmental leagues in North America. So without further ado, I give you Dave Michaud. So just a quick note here before we get started that David's microphone for this interview was not cooperating 100%, and we never know that until after the conversation is over. So we were able to minimize some of the inadequacies in post-production, which is great. Just want you to be aware that, when we are doing these interviews over Zoom or over another technology, that it's tough to get perfect all the time. So although we want to maintain a high standard here on this show, and that's definitely something that I'm serious about, I did feel that this conversation was worthwhile uploading and presenting to you guys, because there's a lot of value in what David has to say and what we discussed. So just a heads up, the audio is not 100% perfect, but I think you can bear with it and enjoy the conversation. Thank you. All right, here we are with Dave Michaud. Dave, thanks so much for joining us today on Up My Hockey.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
No, I appreciate it. It's kind of a crazy time here to be talking. I know you're in a great neck of the woods there in Souk, British Columbia, there on the island, and I'm stuck in this little mini paradise in Vernon. But life is still a little different right now. We should all be watching playoff hockey, but instead we're doing interviews like this.
I was trying to say, I sent out a tweet the other day saying, seeing as we're getting ripped off of playoff beards, should we maybe consider quarantine beards? But yeah, it's such obviously a strange time. I feel really, really grateful to be stuck where I'm stuck. I tell my girlfriend that all the time, that, we're literally a 2-minute walk out the front door to a beautiful ocean little walk. And, I feel pretty isolated out here. So I'm not sure how I'd feel if I was in a 33rd floor condo in downtown Toronto or something. But
yeah, exactly. My heart goes out
okay.
to everyone in New York and those places where,
100%.
places are small and there's not much places to go. And so we are blessed here. But yeah, I mean, it does give us an opportunity to talk, which I appreciate. And I really want to look forward to speaking with you, Dave, just because, you've touched so many different aspects of the game, and that's really what we're about here, is like having the discussion about what it takes to have hockey be great, and now your current role there as president of the Bulldogs. I know a lot of the guys that are listening here and are talking to me are guys that I work with, either are considering the BCJ or the WHL and what the best route is for them, and how to navigate all these camps come fall and all the invites and all that stuff. There's a lot for parents and players, so I definitely want to get into that. But I want to rewind back to the early 2000s when and got involved with the Kelowna Rockets in a radio capacity. So was that what you did back east? Were you a radio guy before you got here?
Oh, I was a dumb kid back east and looking for a change, and decided I had a friend who moved to Kelowna, BC in the early 2000s, and said, "Hey man, you got to come out here. This place is paradise." And I had an ex-girlfriend at the time. I said, I think I need a little space. And I said, well, how about I move into BC? Is that enough space for you? And who knew how long this adventure was going to be? And, here we are 20 some years later. But I moved to the Okanagan sight unseen, had no idea what my plan was. And I ended up getting into radio sales with the group at Sun FM at the time. And that was it, just having some fun, but was always a huge junior hockey fan. I grew up in Ontario, watched the Sudbury Wolves. And so when I had the opportunity to start going to Kelowna Rockets games, the company that I worked for had a suite and would often invite, clients and stuff. And so I was always first to say, yeah, I'll go and I'll host the suite and watch the games. And so, Regan Bartel, the longtime voice of the Kelowna Rockets, and I just sort of hit it off in the newsroom one day and started talking shop, and rarely a day went by where we didn't, have some sort of back and forth about the Rockets and what was happening. And, as fate would have it, one day his color guy at the time had a little bout of laryngitis and had to sit out the weekend. And Regan said, hey, I couldn't think of anybody else to maybe fill in. Would you be interested? And I thought, oh, sure. And so that was all I needed to be bit by the hockey bug again, was getting in that broadcast booth and seeing the games up hand and getting to meet the players. And it was really a fun way to sort of get back into the game.
That's crazy. So you actually took over that guy's job?
Yeah. Well, so it's kind of funny how it worked out. A few weeks later, fully recovered from the laryngitis, but he had to go away on a business trip, and we said, hey, would you love to do it again? And so I filled in, and I think I ended up going on a road game or two with Regan towards the end of the season. And then that summer he asked if I'd be interested in doing it. So my timing was actually quite awful, because this was right at the end of the Memorial Cup run. And so my first official season with the Kelowna Rockets was right after all the good stuff happened in 2007. So that was a pretty young team that didn't have a lot of success. I remember I was so excited. I'll never forget. They lost their season opener that year to the expansion Chilliwack Bruins, and I was on the road for that game. And when we lost to that expansion team, I looked at Regan and said, this could be a long year. And sure enough, it was. But tons of fun, lots of great memories.
Right. So how long were you in the broadcast booth there doing that?
So I think 3 seasons really. So I had an opportunity to really get to know the Hamilton family, which was great. Bruce can be a scary guy at times, and you certainly knew the games where you could maybe go over and say hi, and maybe the games to shy away. But I look back at the coaching staffs during my time that I was there. Jeff Truitt, became a real good friend, and really Jeff Truitt probably should get more credit in my path in hockey, because we just happened to be sitting on a Rockets bus one day. And guys have to understand, as a color commentator, you're not often welcome on the bus or behind the scenes. And so I just happened to be on the bus alone with Jeff Truitt one day, and we were talking hockey, and he said, you know, Mish, you're a good guy. He goes, anytime you want to come, just let Regan know you can come on the bus and be a part of this. And that really sort of ignited my fire. So it was really a cool experience to get to know Jeff Truitt, and then Ryan Huska took over, and that relationship sort of continued. And so what a couple of great guys to get to learn from.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a testament to your personality from, I just watched, you know, your history and the stuff you've been involved in. I mean, to get invited to go on a radio booth, I mean, not everyone's going to put their hand up and say, heck yeah, I want to do that, you know? So you know, you put yourself out there, you're prepared to put yourself in some uncomfortable situations, and you have the personality type, I guess, and the, you know, and the courage to be able to do something like that. And again, I mean, and that leads into being on the bus and being around those guys and all that stuff. It can be an intimidating situation. So how was that life? I mean, what was it, Jeff, there that kind of took you under his wing a little bit and made you feel part of a part?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think really Jeff Truitt was the start of that, and then it became, and then Ryan Huska sort of allowed that to sort of carry on, Jason. So, you know, for me, and then you're in Bruce Hamilton's trust, and it wasn't so bad for the color guy to be around. And you know, I think at the end of the day, you know, people knew I was keen to help out and eager, and sort of welcomed it, right? So it was obviously at that time, you know, an organization that had so much success over a short period of time. And you know, to this day, I credit, you know, the way I expect my teams to behave. A lot of that I learned from Bruce Hamilton and Jeff Truitt and Ryan Huska, and you know, just sort of the way you're supposed to carry yourself as a junior hockey player, and the expectations. And I always say to my guys, we're going to have some fun, but we're here to work.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great question there, because for those who don't know who are listening, Bruce Hamilton, he's the owner of the Kelowna Rockets, and you know, a lot of history, a lot of success with the club, but also just kind of made a pretty brazen move this season with letting Adam Foote go, NHL Hall of Famer, with his kid on the team who's the captain, and let him go with, geez, it might have been a month left in the year and heading into the Memorial Cup. So Bruce obviously isn't afraid to make some big moves and some big decisions if he feels like it. What was he like to work for or with?
Like I say, I think intimidating would be the word. I think often he's referred to as the Eagle with his white hair, and he sits up top in his perch at Prospera Place and looks down, and you know, so you always knew when the Eagle was in the building. And but he was a great man, and to this day, I mean, you know, essentially I work in a, you know, I suppose a competitive league. You know, Bruce will always pick up the phone and offers great advice, and you know, there's lots of give and take there. If he needs help with a player, obviously very, very grateful that he would think of me as a resource to get him some information, and you know, vice versa as well. Certainly there's been players we've had an opportunity in you know, my short time in Port Alberni to consider, and went to Bruce to see what his thoughts were as well. So great guy to work with and be around. And I just think it's the, you know, the culture that I learned from Bruce Hamilton. You hear that word in hockey a lot, you know, whether the team's got a winning culture, a losing culture, what their aura is around them, Jason. And I just think I learned so much from what Bruce Hamilton expected of the Kelowna Rockets that, you know, was really evident to me quickly that I admired that. And that was something that I really wanted to take to heart.
No, it's great. It's great you point that out, because we've talked about that on this podcast before, is that word culture. I've actually done some keynotes on it before, that it's this word, right, that doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. Everyone wants it. Not everyone, and some people think that they have it when they don't, you know, and I just think it's a really interesting thing, and it is so important to the success of a franchise. What were some of the biggest takeaways with developing that culture that you got from the time with the Rockets?
I just think it's, you know, honestly, I think probably the biggest thing is just the level of standard that's expected. There's a consistency that's expected, and there's no deviating from it. You know, one thing I learned is there's lots of really good hockey players out there, but you look for good people too. And quite frankly, I think that's always the defining trait on whether a player is going to advance in the game. And I know I've heard you touch on that on previous podcasts. Good guys move on, you know, and the expectation certainly around the Kelowna Rockets was that everyone was going to buy in, and if you didn't, then you were on your way somewhere else. So I think for me, I learned that it's okay to have high standards and it's okay to expect, and you know, you have to understand that these are 16 to 20-year-old young men who, you know, are going to fall down sometimes. So I don't think you can be necessarily militant in your expectations. There has to be a little bit of forgiveness there, you know, but there's nothing wrong with having high standards and trying to hold them accountable to it.
Right. Especially when you relay that message as part of being a bigger picture, right? That's something that's going to benefit them. This is for their best interest, where they want to get to, right? The places they want to go on, the contracts they want to sign. And it's also best for the team, right? I think that's one of the things where it breaks down, because when there is just a rule and guys view it as a rule for a rule or a standard for a standard, there can be some resistance there, right? But when the story's told in a way that makes it appealing to them, that this is going to help me, I think there's more buy-in that way, right? And then when you have the consistency on top of that, like you're saying, that's the key piece, because if you're not consistent, it's like anything else, like training your puppy dog, right? To go outside, go to the bathroom. If you forget a couple of days, you got to start all over again, right? So it's like, and it's hard to be consistent as a coach, as a leader, even as a player. So, I mean, I love you talking about that, because when I work with my guys individually, that is it. What is your personal standard? That's one of the first questions that we start with is, right, you mean, like what level do you want to be, and where do you think you need to change your standards? Because it not only is it the same thing for a team, but it's also individual. And I'm sure you see that with your players as well. The guys that move on probably have a little higher level of expectation for themselves.
Well, there's no question, Jason. And I mean, really, I think it's, you know, we're very fortunate to work with the level of athletes that we work with. I mean, at the end of the day, all these guys have a lot at stake, whether it's players at the Western League level who are, you know, trying to figure out their path, or whether it's guys at our level. And quite frankly, for our guys, the stakes might be a little bit higher when they're younger at junior, because they're trying to attract that NCAA scholarship at an early enough age and get that commitment. Well, you know, that's a school that's investing potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in an athlete, and they're not going to do it if you're not a good kid, or you're not a team player, or, you know, the coach doesn't vouch for you. And, you know, the one thing I learned really early in hockey, and this would be another Rocket, Lauren Fry, you know, their longtime director of player personnel. Lauren taught me right away that, you know, in hockey, you're only as good as your word. And quite frankly, if you go around and you blow smoke up a player or a team or a scout or another manager, you know, trying to move a player on who maybe doesn't deserve it or isn't quite as good a person as you say they are, eventually that's going to catch up to you and you're going to get found out. So I'm always real honest with our players that I'm never going to lie to move you on. If there's something in your game that the other team needs to know about, or the school needs to really know about, they're going to know about it. Because at the end of the day, my reputation is paramount, and you know, it seems to work well. The players really do understand what's at stake, and again, they're kids; they're going to trip every once in a while. But you know, for the most part, we got some pretty dedicated athletes at this level of hockey. So,
right. No, that's an interesting. I mean, I thought we'd get into this a little bit later, but I think that's a good segue into that aspect of trust, because as you've heard, I do talk about that a ton, like that the relationships you make within the game now as a player, right? Now as a player with your assistant coaches, with your coaches, with the GM, with the training staff, like being a good teammate, being a good human is critical. I mean, there's so many stories where guys move on, even at the NHL level, because they made a bond with some coach that really liked them. Right. And now elevated them because they trusted them and understood the person and knew that they were going to be a benefit in the locker room, and maybe not a better player than somebody else, but just because that trust factor was there. So there's benefits as a human being, there's benefits as an athlete to do that. But now when you're saying, and I 100% agree with you, that you have to keep your integrity intact when you're talking to these players. I mean, when you're talking to these schools, these scouts that are calling you, now, and when you're being honest and the players know that, how do the players say if they have, like, how do you encourage that discussion now if they actually need some help somewhere where they maybe are going to be vulnerable about something that's slowing them up, but they want to protect themselves too because they're worried that, you know, I don't want everyone to know about this. Like, how do you handle that type of a scenario?
Well, and I think that's where, again, trust comes back into play. I mean, I'm never going to encourage my staff or myself personally, and never going to sewer a player because there's maybe something going on in their personal life or something like that. I mean, if it's super serious, I think a lot of times these conversations come down to, hey, look, there's something you need to know, like his family life. He has a little bit of issues, but here's how we're working through it. And most schools will go, okay, great, thanks for the heads up, that's great. And that doesn't become public knowledge. I mean, quite frankly, everyone's in this together, right? And at the end of the day, we all want to see these players move on to their best of their abilities, and whether that's on a full ride scholarship to an NCAA Division I program, or moving on through the Western League into the CIS or the NHL one day. We all do this because we want to help these players move on, right? So, but I think we've all come across some kids who maybe don't buy into the culture and aren't really a part of the solution. And I think it's human nature. There's players you want to help more than others, right? So I feel I'm really lucky in the sense that I can honestly say that there's very few players that I don't have a lot of time for in my history, and I think that just maybe goes back to a lot of who we try to bring into our programs, right?
Yeah.
I just don't bring in bad apples. I mean, they exist, we know it. I just don't really want to be a part of that. I want to surround myself with 23 really focused, dedicated guys, all pulling the rope in the same direction, and it seems to work well. So I think whenever you go to anything, Jason, where the end goal is shared by everybody, then you're in a pretty good spot to begin with. So again, I think it just goes back to trust. You got to trust the people you're talking to that will use the info properly, and so you know when to share and not to share.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head when saying you want to be part of the solution. And when I talk to players, I really encourage that dialogue, that communication. I think the environment, just in hockey in general, I think is changing, right? That we're able to ask for help, or able to want to get somebody's opinion, or get explanations to questions that we might have. I think that's more of expected from leadership now in hockey. But the key is here, and what I tell my players all the time, is the accountability aspect of being part of the solution, right? If you ask for help, or if you want something and you hear something, you have to now put that into action and go to work on it. And I think that's where you're saying is like where you start losing that trust then. I mean, if you want to fix something, I'll help you fix it, but you got to put in the work to do it. So I think as a player, there's need to be accountability there to actually do the work.
I think you hit the nail on the head by saying you got to put in the work. I mean, this isn't easy. If this was an easy path for anyone, whether it's playing junior A or major junior, a lot of people would do it, and a lot of people get turned away, right? So, I mean, I think, look, again, it's fine to stumble. It's fine to have a part of your game that isn't necessarily what it needs to be. And that's the job of the coaching staff, to work with you and help develop your game. But when you identify something and you ask for help, when you're the first guy off the ice at the end of practice, instead of putting in that extra 20 minutes when you can, that stuff gets noticed, and so trust me, those conversations happen every day of the week, saying, yeah, you know what, the kid isn't very good in the face-off circle, but I'm going to tell you right now, he's working hard at it. He's on the ice 20 minutes after practice with my assistant, doing nothing but draws. It's coming. He's bumped 5% in the last month. Like, those conversations happen all the time. And so people I always think if you work hard, the results come, right? Like, at the end of the day, the hard work equals results eventually. Just because something doesn't work today, we always want things to get fixed overnight, but you got to start that process, right? And so I think for me, if you see the work ethics there and the communication lines are there, I'm good with it. It's when the communication's there, but the work ethic falls down, that you kind of get frustrated and you say, okay, well, this isn't what he wants then. And that's okay.
Yeah. No, and it's, when you do put in the work, it's funny because I was a guy, and I always tell a little personal story here. For whatever reason, I didn't want people to know my stuff, right? Like, I didn't want to be the guy doing push-ups in front of the coach's office, or I didn't mind going on the ice late. I love being on the ice, right? And that was when I actually had my most fun, was like after practice or before practice, was working on stuff. But when it came to like that, maybe that extra mile stuff that people would see, I would do the stuff, but it wouldn't be in front of anybody. And that hurt me. I know it did, because when people don't see it, they don't know, right? And And that's the thing is like being comfortable at the rink for players and being comfortable in that environment. Like not only does it help you, like, so there is the results that you're talking about, but the people that are watching you, because you want to see success and you want to see guys get rewarded, you actually maybe sometimes even see things that aren't even there. You know what I mean? Like, if you see a guy working on faceoffs for 20 minutes for 2 weeks, you're going to notice every time he wins a draw now more than when he loses one, you know? So it's like, even that in itself benefits you because people want to tell a good story. They want to get behind you. They want you to succeed. So like all that stuff matters. And it's kind of, that's the interesting stuff. I like having these conversations because people don't generally think about it that way, right? But there's way more involved than just doing the work too. Like one, it makes you better, makes you a better player. The people around you get excited about you because they want to see you succeed. And then they actually notice sometimes things that aren't even there, which helps you too. So, I mean, there's like a no-lose situation to put in the work. I mean, that's for sure.
You know, and I mean, most people at this level love the game and they want to be around it. They're willing to help you, you know, so put in the work, have fun with it. I think at some point, if the work isn't fun to you anymore, then it's probably, you know, a realization that maybe this isn't the path you want to go down. And I always say that's fine. I mean, you know, a little further back, but back in my major midget days when I was working with 15, 16, 17-year-olds, you know, there'd be times where 15-year-olds would come to me and say, like, I don't know if I want this. You know, and that's cool. Like, you don't have to do this. Go play baseball. Go be with your friend. You know, like this. You're a young man, and I've seen that even progress now, where some players that I had as young midget players, you know, come to the crossroads of their career at 19 or 20 in junior hockey, and then realize that maybe this isn't what I want to do, and I reassure them that that's okay too. You've got plenty of runway in front of you as a man, and you know, take what you've learned from the game and bring it to other parts, and you'll have great success. Because, you know, again, I think most of the people we work with are all really good people. So you'll find success in whatever you want to do, if hockey is in it.
Yeah, no, 100%. One thing I do say, I mean, if somebody comes to me with that question, usually I'll try and spend some time on it because there are some things that are hard, but it's like, what really aren't you enjoying about this? And what do you love about it? Because, you know, like you say, the runway for life is long, but the runway for hockey really isn't, you know? So like, that's the thing too, is like, if you think, if you're questioning it at all, like really, I really encourage guys to align really what they want. You know what I mean? Maybe the situation that they're in right now isn't that comfortable, you know, but yeah, I mean, I encourage guys, you can play hockey for only a certain amount of time, and you can do a lot of other things for the rest of your life. So, I mean, as far as that's concerned, it's nice to try and get what you can out of the game for sure.
I feel really fortunate in Port Alberni this year. We were able to bring in a 20-year-old who had spent 4 years in the Quebec League. He was a kid from Newfoundland named Matthew Grouchy, and he just wasn't having fun anymore back east. You know, he was a 20-year-old. He was on a team that was really struggling, had been on some pretty successful teams, and just was not having fun anymore. And our assistant coach knew him well and put a call into him and said, look, if you want to come out to Port Alberni and finish your junior career, we'd love to have you. And he came, and you know what, I'm really thankful that we had him for the short time that we did. He basically joined our club at Christmas time, but outside of being a point per game player for us, which never hurts when you can add those guys at Christmas time, just for our guys to be able to see his work ethic and his passion for the game. And I take some pride in the fact that I think we were able to sort of reignite his fire a little bit. Like, he came out here with an open mind, and you know, I joked with him the first time we toured the Port Alberni multiplex, like, he had spent some time with the Quebec Remparts playing in their new rink, the Centre Videotron, which was built for basically to get the Nordiques back, right? And so he's going from an 18,000 seat rink in the Quebec League to the 1,800 seat Port Alberni multiplex, and he said, I don't care, I'm here to have fun, and we're going to win, and let's do this. And it was so refreshing just to see a smile back on his face, and so, you know, it was really cool. But our players learned a lot from having him. But it's funny, sometimes just a change of scenery can reignite some fire too, right?
Yeah, 100%. And actually, it's not. Yeah, we had that with my last guest, David Oliver, you know, current assistant coach of the New York Rangers. So we were going through his career, and he played for the Rangers at a time when Gretzky was there and Messi was there, and like the first 3 years of his NHL career were kind of crazy, and he ended up, you know, being offered a one-way contract in the NHL, but wasn't having any fun because he wasn't playing. He was healthy scratch. He was in bottom of the lineup, and one of his old buddies from Michigan State called him and said, hey, let's go play in Houston together in the IHL, right? Dave Tippett was the coach. He's like, you need to have some fun again. And he's like, you know what? I do. And so he took a pay cut. He went to the IHL, scored 40 goals, and and 2 years later he's back up in the show again, right? But he said that was a big decision for him because he wasn't liking the game anymore, right? Yeah. So when it gets to that, sometimes a change of pace, change of mindset, change of coach. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen there, but it's I just encourage you guys not to give up too quick either, because there's going to be bumps in the road, right? And everyone goes through them. Let's talk maybe a little bit about, so you were with the Rockets, a major midget program. I'm sure we could spend tons of time there if we wanted to, because that's a big deal too. A lot of guys are having a decision between, major midget and academies and all this kind of stuff. But maybe let's just talk a little bit about what your role was there with the Rockets as far as GM. Like what did that mean for a major midget team, the Okanagan Rockets, which was kind of developed, wasn't it, as a feeder system a little bit for the Rockets is what they were trying to do there?
Yeah, so I mean, the BC Major Midget League was created essentially to let midget kids stay home, right? So they were regional teams. Our draw zone in the Okanagan was essentially from Osoyoos to Enderby, basically, was the players we were able to pull from, and there was,
which is about what? I mean, just for everyone listening, that's about maybe 300 kilometers.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, for sure. About, maybe a 300-kilometer radius from Kelowna. And so all of our games are played out of the Capital News Center in the Mission. And, it was a neat little rink. But, the program had some success. As a matter of fact, my first year running the team was the only time in team history they ever missed the playoffs. So that was sort of an interesting welcome to it. But, for me, really what I realized was, okay, this is something I want to do. I don't have a lot of people that I'm answering to. I can pretty much run this program with all the autonomy I want. And so honestly, I just tried, Jason, to model it as a mini Kelowna Rockets, and Bruce Hamilton was a huge resource for me and help at that point. And that's really, I think, when Bruce and I became closer and closer was when I took over that Rockets program. And I think he saw the work that I was putting in. We built a dressing room, which no program had at that time. And tried to really build a home for our players at the Capital News Center. For those who aren't familiar with that building, if you're not in the Okanagan, I mean, it's got a great gym upstairs. It's a twin sheet facility. There's a running track. There's the indoor fields. And so it really gave us the opportunity to build a program, almost like a little mini junior team. And so our guys would come in after school and they would get a workout in. We'd be on the ice. And, it was really fun for me because, like I said, I didn't have a lot of checks and balances. Nobody was second guessing my decisions. And I quite frankly felt I had a great model in Bruce Hamilton and Lauren Fry to bounce things off of and just try and build something. And so it was really built. Like we went from missing the playoffs to losing in the first round to losing in the league finals to finally in 2013-14 winning the whole thing and advancing on to the Pacific Regionals, where we played the Red Deer Optimist Chiefs. And anybody who follows midget hockey knows that they're quite a juggernaut. They were the 2-time defending national champs at the time. And we had to go in and play a best-of-3 series in Red Deer. And to this day, it's one of the coolest environments I've ever been a part of. The old Red Deer Memorial Arena downtown was packed, 2,000 plus people all banging pots and pans, and you had grown men wearing Indian headdresses on with war paint on, yelling at our kids. And, from a little team in the Okanagan to go into that environment was definitely something. And so we ended up winning game 3 of that series in overtime. And to this day, I can still picture the nothing but silence in the arena and the cheering and hooting and hollering from our guys as we realized we were going to go to a national championship. So that was definitely really cool.
Oh yeah, what an amazing thing to be a part of. It's hard winning, right? It's really hard winning. Even getting there is one thing, and it's harder to do it. So I mean, congratulations to you and all those kids. That's something they'll never forget for sure. First of all, you're right. I mean, that Capital News Center is amazing. Like what a great facility to play out of. Anyone who gets to play there is blessed. But how did you get that role again? So now here you are. Now you're GM of this Major Midget Rockets program. Like how did Dave Michaud throw his hat in the ring for that, and how were you able to get selected for that?
Yeah, so it was sort of by a little fluke and a little default, to be honest, Jason. So Michaud Antison was the head coach of the team at the time, and Michaud's a longtime Okanagan minor hockey coach and had a wonderful pro career in Switzerland for a lot of years. And so I asked a friend, I'm like, hey, do you know who this Michaud guy is? And he said, yeah, I know him. I'd like to help out with that program. And, can you maybe put me in touch with him? And we met for lunch one day, and he said, well, how would you like to be my team manager? And I said, well, Michaud, like, to me, a team manager in minor hockey is, selling 50-50 tickets and booking meals, and like I want to be involved on the hockey side. And he said, done, no problem. You can, let's do this together. And then I guess maybe as fate would have it, 2 months into that season, he took a pro job in Switzerland, and left me all on my own with Brandon West, who was a longtime BCHL coach in West Kelowna and Salmon Arm and Surrey. And but anyway, Brando and I were left to try and figure it out, and we didn't do a lot of figuring out that first year, but thankfully I got better and better as time wore on. So really, as I took over that program and I started making more decisions, it was always a coach-run league, and I was sort of adamant that these programs need somebody at the top of the pyramid who maybe understands hockey, but also can understand fundraising and dealing with the parents. And coaches want to coach. Coaches want to work on power plays and figure out how to win hockey games. And somebody else has to kind of take the load off. So working with BC Hockey with Barry Petchenko, the president of BC Hockey, we were able to create a new role essentially where major midget teams would have a true general manager that would oversee the business of the teams as well as the on-ice performance and deal with the coaching staffs and things like that. So it really felt like a little bit of maybe a pioneer helping get that program started, and it's exploded now. I mean, the BC Major Midget League has had GMs since I've been gone, and that thing's kept on rolling. So it's something, certainly a proud part of my life. But again, I just kind of go back to, these guys basically gave me a key to a team and didn't ask any questions. So I sort of took the ball and ran with it, I guess.
Yeah, well, good for you to put yourself in that situation and to make the phone call to begin with, right? And I mean, obviously, like seeing now, like your arc within hockey, now the owner and president of a BCJHL team. I mean, I don't think probably without that stop there being GM of that team for those 5 years, you probably wouldn't feel that you could or would, or you wouldn't know what you're getting into, right? So that was part of your history there, right?
Yeah, there's no question that without the BC Major Midget League, there's no chance I'd be where I am today. Because I mean, really, like anything else in hockey, it all boils down to networking and who you know and who you get to trust and things like that. And so not only did I have my relationship with the Rockets, obviously, but created some really close relationships with a guy like Barclay Parnetta, who was in Tri-City, and Matt Bardsley, who was in Portland at the time. Now he's in Kamloops. Like, when you're at the rink, you see guys and you talk about players and you start to get a sense of what teams are looking for. And there's just lots of back and forth and lots of relationships get built that way. So as I went further and further in it, I felt more and more comfortable that, okay, I can swim in the same waters as these guys. Like, I'm not out of my league. And I think sometimes as a guy who didn't play the game at a high level, you sometimes have a little bit of an inferiority complex. Like, do I belong in the same room as some of these guys, right? And I think you learn as you go along when you do things the right way and you're willing to listen and learn and study what other guys do. Maybe you do belong.
Yeah, good for you. Ask questions, right? Be curious, be a learner, and you can go a long way with that. And actually, I owe you. I mean, that's why we're talking today, probably, right? Is when Dave was there, I can't remember all the back and forth, but I think there was one of the families that was up here when it was playing for you. Their son was playing, and they suggested that maybe you guys could use some help. That was when the coach left, and there was a little bit of turmoil there, and they asked if I could come out, and you 100% agreed and welcomed me in with open arms, and I came out there for probably half a season, I think, driving out there, and that was my really first dipping my toe back in the water, and being a part of the game from that aspect, right? As kind of a mentor, I mean, I wasn't running drills or anything. I was just helping guys. If I saw a turn or whatever, I would talk to them. And for me, which I got to thank you for, I started to realize, you know what, I like this. I mean, and I think I'm good at it. And the relatability, it really helps, like to be able to have a guy on the ice that they know has kind of been through it and can talk to them. And so, so that was my first kind of dipping my toe in as far as from the coaching standpoint. Now here I am doing what I'm doing. So, I mean, it all kind of comes together. It's great.
Oh, always proud to say I got a team photo with Jason Padol and Sam. It's hanging somewhere, but. And again, that's a good part about being in the Okanagan. For people who aren't familiar with the Okanagan landscape, I mean, there are literally dozens and dozens and dozens of former, high-level NHL retired players. I mean, we had Wade Redden come out to practices and work with our defense corps for a season. Like, you're just spoiled by the riches of the knowledge in that area. So, now that I'm on Vancouver Island, I definitely get a little homesick sometimes about the Okanagan, particularly when it's a 35-degree summer day outside. But
I know, I hear you. That's why you mentioned Wade. We just ran into each other in Subway in Enderby there, and Wade was a gold medal teammate of mine for Team Canada. Right. So we played junior hockey all the way through, and it was great to see him every time. And I talked to him about coming on the show, so actually it just reminds me I got to give him a call and get him lined up here. Great, Wade's a great guy. Just a great guy.
Jeff Finley was another guy who was a huge help, and his son's become quite the player here as well. And so, there's definitely if you're a hockey player in the Okanagan, there's no shortage of resources real close at hand.
100%. So just a quick note here before we get started that David's microphone for this interview was not cooperating 100%, and we never know that until after the conversation is over. So we were able to minimize some of the inadequacies in post-production, which is great. Just want you to be aware that, when we are doing these interviews over Zoom or over another technology, that it's tough to get perfect all the time. So although we want to maintain a high standard here on this show, and that's definitely something that I'm serious about, I did feel that this conversation was worthwhile uploading and presenting to you guys, because there's a lot of value in what David has to say and what we discussed. So just a heads up, the audio is not 100% perfect, but I think you can bear with it and enjoy the conversation. Thank you. So what was your, as far as what were your big takeaways that you would think from your time with the Rockets that you now are using in your current role? Was there any lessons learned there or takeaways that you incorporated?
Yeah, again, I think it all sort of boils down to I learned what sort of culture I wanted my team to have and what sort of standards I wanted to hold them to. And, it's funny, my whole process with the Bulldogs, we took over the team late last summer. And it was sort of a late move bringing in our new head coach and GM. And I kind of felt like we were sort of identityless this year. We just didn't have the structure that I think I'm used to having. And it's one thing that when the season ended, we talked about as a staff saying, we need to create our identity here and get back to, what is a Bulldog? What do we want in a player? And maybe there's a good hockey player that just doesn't check enough of our boxes. And it doesn't mean they're not a good player or a good kid, but it's not who we're after. And so maybe we have to, be a little more discretionary this year and take a pass on a player who might not fit, right? And so I no question learned that in the Rockets. There's also, it's funny, the things you learn. So literally the first thing I really ever did in hockey where I got a paycheck for was I spent one season scouting with the Portland Winterhawks under Mike Johnston and learned so much from that man. Obviously he went on to Pittsburgh and had a couple seasons there with the Penguins before going back to Portland. But Mike has this player ranking system that he uses to build his teams. And he has a formula that you assign a value to players and give them roles. And once you add them all up, if you hit a certain number, you're a playoff caliber team. And then if you hit a number above that, you're probably a championship contender. Things got to happen and you still got to win the games. But on paper, if you add everything up and it equals this, you got a chance. And so that's something I took away from Mike and I've always used with my teams and it's very rarely wrong. So it's something that I just think you try and build an identity on who you are and what kind of program you want to have, and then try and find the pieces that fit into that.
100%. An interesting piece of your career after the Rockets, you got involved with CAA sports with JP Barry and Pat Brisson. And now JP, there's another connection. He was actually my agent after Mike Barnett got out of IMG because of his, his GM and what he was doing there with Phoenix. He wasn't allowed to, I don't forget what the right term for that is, but he couldn't do both. He couldn't wear both hats, right? So a lot of his clients went over to JP, and I was one of them. And so how did you get involved there now after, now you've been a color guy, now you've been the GM of a major midget team, and now you're with a sports agency. So how do we end up with them?
Well, so that was actually concurrent with my time. You might find this hard to believe, but there's not a lot of money in midget hockey, Jason. It wasn't exactly a paying the bills kind of role, but I definitely ate a few chicken wings on the parents' expense over my time in the BC Major Midget League. But so while I was running the Okanagan Rockets, again, it's your reputation and who you know, and at the time, I was just given the role of assistant director of operations for Team Pacific, which competes in the World U17 Junior A Challenge, and we were off to Windsor that year, and it was the 95 age group, and where your neck of the woods, you'd be very familiar with Curtis Lazar. Curtis was sort of headlining that team with, like that was a heck of a roster. Like we had Curtis Lazar, Sam Reinhart, Nick Patan. Our two goaltenders were Eric Comrie and Tristan Jarry. Half that team's playing in the NHL now, and so JP had a few clients that were on that team, and so we just met at the Capital News Center one day, and JP was obviously a guy that I was very familiar with, and forged a little bit of a friendship, and we ended up having a few lunch dates, and I had an opportunity. I'll never forget JP and I had sort of become close, and we started talking about, hey, maybe there's this role with CAA that might be a good fit for you. And, it's funny how your career takes different stages. Like I was still selling radio while running the Okanagan Rockets, and I just dreamed of a life where I could just focus on hockey, right? And that was my goal, was how do I not have to go work somewhere else one day? Like how can I just get a paycheck in the game of hockey? And I kept sort of sharing that dream with JP, and one day he called and said, I think maybe we got a fit here for you. And so I had the chance to go work with CAA, but I remember, so his son Brendan was 15 at the time and tried out for the Okanagan Rockets, and I cut him. And I thought, oh boy, like this could be bad here. I'm going to find out real quick if the only reason JP was hanging out with me is because he wanted his kid to play on my team. Fortunately, it didn't change anything. And Brendan actually played with us at 16 and was our goalie as we went to the national championships. So it all worked out in the end. But I remember thinking, I got to pick up the phone and tell JP I'm going to cut his kid here and see how this goes.
How did it go?
It went well. He understood. He knew where we were at. So
right.
It's good. But I always joke, I think of JP Barry as one of the smartest hockey guys I've ever had the opportunity to spend time with, and he definitely had a few hockey dad moments with me during his son's time with us. So it just shows everyone's vulnerable to it. But
yeah, 100%. Right? Isn't that interesting? What was your role there with CAA when you came on?
Yeah, so primarily, so I worked out of Kelowna with JP, but traveled a lot to the head office for CAA Sports is in LA, and it's quite a scene. It's a beautiful building on a street called Avenue of the Stars, and CAA, for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, it's way more than just a sports agency. I mean, if you've ever watched a movie, it's got CAA written all over it. If you've ever listened to a song on the radio, it's got CAA written all over it. It's a pretty big juggernaut of a talent agency. And they got into the sports game, sort of later in their development, but best of the best. CAA represented it still does, but Crosby and Malkin and Kane and Taves and Drew, the Sedins. I mean, the list goes Luongo. The list goes on and on about the players that they work with, and so I was real fortunate. My job really with them was to work with JP's younger guys in the West, and another great agent who's based out of Calgary named Mark McKay. He and I would sort of coordinate and work with our young guys. So I'd spend a lot of time driving to junior rinks and talking with our players after games and making sure that they were okay in their situations and everything was good. And then I'd hop back in the car and drive back to Kelowna, and it was great. But get a chance to work with the young, Matthew Barzell and Dante Fabro and Tyson Jones. I mean, I was spoiled with Tyson because I had him from midget through to my time in Penticton through to, but real special to go to the NHL draft and see these young guys realize their dreams and see the moments with the families and, have that opportunity to sort of see behind the curtain on a lot of that stuff was real special. So it's, it was a 5-year almost stretch in my life professionally that I'm very proud of, and it taught me a ton. mostly it taught me that I wanted to be on the team side. I didn't want to be in the agency world. And, credit to Pat and JP, they were both relentless in their desire to help me find a team that was going to be a good fit for me. And, sometimes things are fits and sometimes they aren't. But, for me, I knew I love trophies. I wanted to win trophies, and not a lot of trophies in the agency life, right? It's a tough business. So very grateful for my time there. But, Saturday night, hockey night in Canada holds a special place for me now. And you can sit down and, watch a game and see some of the guys that you were able to spend some time with as 16, 17-year-olds and see them doing their thing in the NHL now. It definitely holds a special place for you.
Great. So were they then a part of you getting into the Penticton Vees organization?
Yeah, big time. Yeah, big time. So I mean, part and parcel. So Fred Harbinson, who's a longtime head coach and GM and president of the Penticton Vees, we had built a relationship during my time with the Okanagan Rockets, where we were sending some players to Penticton, and again, it goes back to trust. He knew that we would do a good job, and so if there were some players that felt needed a little bit more time, he would recommend our program to those guys, and so we had some back and forth, and Brendan Barry was going to Penticton, Tyson Jost was going to Penticton, Liam Finley was a player of mine who was just finishing up his career at the University of Denver, was a player headed to Penticton, and so Fred and I were just talking more and more, and we found a role that was going to be a fit for me in Penticton, and JP was certainly a part of not only giving his blessing to Fred to go down that road, but just a great mentor for me to sit down and talk about the pros and cons of a decision like this, because it's a big one. I mean, to leave the biggest sports agency on the planet, where quite frankly, if you just keep trucking along, you're probably on a pretty good path to continued success. To go to a BCHL team, despite the fact that the Penticton Vees are about as big of a junior A program as it gets. But I felt very fortunate that I was able to do all this while staying in the Okanagan. I lived in West Kelowna. I lived in West Kelowna when I worked for JP Barry. I lived in West Kelowna when I worked for the Vees for a long time before finally moving to Penticton. But to be able to stay close to home and be a part of some real special programs was just awesome for me.
No, great. And what was your role there with Penticton?
So it kind of morphed, and it started as director of player development and corporate sales. And so the corporate sales part kind of came in when Fred and I were talking. I said, well, what sort of salary did you have in mind? And he threw out a number, and I said, I can't do that. Like, I can't live off that. And so as I go back, it's funny how things all tie together. I had a good career in radio sales and certainly felt comfortable being a part of a sales program. And so I said, well, who's doing our corporate sales in Penticton? And so we said, oh, it's a good idea. We could probably use some help on that. And so that was able how to sort of tie it together, where I always joke, I sold rink boards to support my hockey habit, right? So it was real fun to be a part of the recruiting program, and when you visit with families and try and convince them that Penticton's the spot to develop their son, and so that was great. But as my role sort of continued in Penticton, we ended up getting nominated to host, or we won the bid to host the Western Canada Cup, which was sort of a step before the RBC Cup, which is now gone back to being called the Centennial Cup. It's the National Junior A Championship. And so it was about a near $1 million budget for a 10-day tournament. And so I really had to pay attention to that and make sure we were bringing in more corporate dollars and selling tickets for it. So the hockey role for that year, it just didn't make sense to continue. So I really took on more of a business focus that year, became an alternate governor with the Vees and started going to BCHL board meetings and sort of started to learn the ropes about how the political and the business side of running a hockey team works. And, I fought it at first. I wasn't very happy about it. I wanted to be a hockey guy. That was really where my brain was at. But again, JP Barry turned to be a tremendous resource and said to me, look, you're never going to forget what a good hockey player looks like. Like, put your time in on the business side, learn the ropes. It's going to be invaluable for you at some point. And little did I know, just a couple of years later, I'd have a chance to own a team myself. And I can tell you with a certainty, Jason, if I didn't go through those, that struggle internally, I would not be ready to run the Alberni Valley Bulldogs the way I feel I'm capable to do so now. So.
Yeah, great. You got both sides of it covered, right? And
Yeah.
the more breadth of knowledge you have in that role, the better off you can serve your team. So good for you. How was the recruitment process? I think that's an interesting thing just to touch on, as far as that, because some guys don't get many offers, right? So it's an easier decision. Some guys get
Sure.
lots of offers, and it makes it a harder decision.
Yeah.
How did you go about approaching parents? I know with Penticton, and you touched on it already. Like Penticton is not a hard place to promote, and not a hard place to
Sure.
endorse. It is one of the premier teams in the BCJ, if not the premier team, along with a couple others. So, I mean, that aspect of it might have been a little easier than some. But like, how did you handle that? Walking into living rooms or picking up the phone and letting guys know that, hey, you got to trust your son with us. We're gonna take care of him.
Sure. So yeah, it's funny. I always say, like, I love working for CAA because you're really looking for first round picks, and if you sit down with a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old and say, we represent Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon, and they're not impressed, then you're probably in the wrong business, right? And so a lot of it was the same with Penticton. I mean, you see the history the Vees have and the track record of success that, and then you show off. If anyone hasn't seen it, just Google the South Okanagan Event Center. It's probably the premier junior A facility in all of Canada, and if not North America. I mean, it's a really special arena, and Penticton supports the Vees like very few cities support a junior A hockey team. I mean, they get 3,000 plus a night, and so I'm real proud of my time there. But yeah, I mean, I think again, it kind of goes back to trust you. Like to me, the whole thing with recruiting a player, it's a big decision for a family on who are we going to trust. And I always say, in my mind, there's three factors that a family's looking for when they're trying to decide where their son's going to play. The first off, is my son going to be safe? Is he in a good spot and a good environment? Most places you can check that box and say yes. But, secondly, is my son going to get better? Is the coaching staff in a position to help him develop and become a better player, a better human being? And then finally, to me, the third one is my son going to have a chance to move on? And so those are the sort of the three principles that I always sort of focus on with a family. I think we're really lucky in Port Alberni. Like, we've got, I think, some of the best billets you've ever seen. We got a longtime billet coordinator who does a great job for us and placing these guys in homes that make sense. We've got an unbelievable educational advisor named Tom McAvey, who's a retired high school principal in Port Alberni, and he is passionate beyond belief about making sure these guys are academically eligible and on the right path when it comes to that. And I love our coaching staff. I think Joe Martin and Brandon Shaw do a great job, and they have connections to move these guys on. So, when I sit down with a family and say, here's what our program can offer, I think we check a lot of boxes, right? But really, it becomes about a relationship, and not naming names, but we're talking to a player right now who there's, quite frankly, a lot of teams all over North America that are on right now, and we're fairly confident he's going to become a Bulldog. And kind of jokingly said to our coach, like, okay, so Joe, like, help me fill in the blank. Like, why is he picking us? and Joe said, it's trust. Like, the family trusts us. I talked to the mom for hours, and there's teams out there that are throwing things at him, and he's just not interested. The mom really believes in our program, and so I think at the end of the day, when you sit down as a family and you start thinking about, are we going to go here? Are we going to go there? Like, often your gut choice is the right choice, and you believe in what they're saying. Like, I always say, it's really easy this time of year, Jason, to tell a player, oh, we envision you're going to be a top six player. You're going to play on the power play. And that's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the summer, right? It really, I don't know how a coach can look a player in the eye this time of year and tell them that. I'll never do it. I mean, I'm honest, and I expect my staff to be honest. And all that's up to you. We're going to provide you a great environment, a good home, great rink, good teammates, good staff. The rest is up to you. Once the puck drops, where you're going to play in the lineup is entirely up to you. And I think families appreciate that. The ability to understand the difference between smoke and mirrors and a good, honest conversation. So that's what I pride ourselves on. And I think that's what leads to success, is just honest recruiting. I hate when I hear teams over recruit. And when I say over recruit, I mean, they're promising the star and moons to a whole bunch of players. And then when they get to training camp, actually they're not a fit. We're going to move them to another team. And, it's hard to hear those stories sometimes. So I just think when you come to something from an honest place, you're always going to win.
Yeah, no, good for you. And that, I mean, boy, a lot of stuff was running through my mind there as you were speaking, because the integrity of the program really, I think, stems from what you're talking about. And you can do the dance a few times, but if you leave solo and these guys go home by themselves, using the dance metaphor, right? Like it catches up with you, right? And you stop being believable. And and I think that's a really important thing, because it is tough to have integrity, and it is tough to be accountable. And when you shift that accountability over to the player to say, hey man, we're going to give you these things and it's up to you to make the difference. I think that started that culture that you're talking about, right? I really do think that's a great spot to start with. But to me, it brought up one of the questions which a lot of guys ask me, and I don't know if there is a one-way answer for this, but I mean, you've been in the major midget developmental process. You're a junior A owner, and there's a lot of 16, 17-year-old kids there, and the parents are trying to figure out, should I be in major midget, where I pretty much think I know I'm going to be a top six or be on the power play, or should I try and graduate to junior A and potentially be a bottom six forward and maybe not get much ice time? And people battle with that. What is your take on that? Do you think that they should be at the best level they should be at, or do you think that they should be down playing more hockey in maybe more critical situations?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question, and it's one that certainly gets faced, all the time to us. And my answer often isn't a popular one to moms, dads, and kids. It's that you should stay behind. Really, I've never seen anything bad come of a player having the ability to dominate or be a counted on player at one level before moving on to the next. And I look back at that Okanagan Rocket team we had in 2013-14 that went to the national championship. We had 11 17-year-olds that year, and there probably wasn't one of them that didn't have the chance to go on to play either junior B or junior A that year. And we sort of sold them on the fact that stick with us, let's do this. We lost in the league final the year before. Let's build a team that has a chance. And it didn't hurt. We had a 15-year-old named Tyson Jost who broke a bunch of league records. We knew he was coming to us, and so that built some excitement. But really, the lesson learned from that was 18 of those 20 players moved on to play junior A or major junior and have successful careers. And so to me, I look at that like the foundation that was built by coming back and playing that extra year of midget, I look at a guy like Troy Stetcher, who was in Penticton, played right through, before going to the University of North Dakota, and then spent his time at University of North Dakota and resisted the urge to turn pro. Dante Fabro is a player we had in Penticton who went on to University of Boston and, had a couple of contracts dangled in front of him by Nashville, but the timing wasn't right for him and the family. They felt that, where the Preds were, it wasn't the best fit. So he went back to school and honed his craft. And I just don't think any time that you spend more time getting better at what you're trying to be good at is going to be bad for you, right? At the end of the day, there's just so many horror stories, Gates, of players who go early, get put in uncomfortable positions, become healthy scratches. And I always say this, like, it was easy when I was in major midget because you can't trade a player, you can't cut a player. Like, once we committed to you, you're our guy. So sink or swim, we're going to work with you for the year. But I hate to say it, it's not that way at the junior hockey level. You can be traded, you can be dropped, you can be sent away. And so it becomes a business very fast when you get to the junior A or the major junior level. So unless you're 100% confident in your ability and you're ready to go, I don't think there's anything wrong. And I know it's easy for me to say with the cost of minor hockey, whether you're at a sports school or playing major midgets, it's not insignificant, and I get that. But if you have the ability to stay and be a leader and contribute and play power play and play pen and kill and maybe wear a letter or be the starting goalie that's going to play a ton of games, do it, because, there's just so many horror stories of players who get put in bad spots, and then it's over. And then we go back to it's not fun anymore, and I don't like this, and I'm not comfortable. And, you just see so much promise sometimes get whittled away right before your eyes. And it's not their fault. It's just, they were put in a bad spot. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. Some of the things that I like to bring up is like where does the alternative? First of all, like where are you playing, and is there a facility? Is there good coaches there?
sure,
Right? Because to me, people get really caught up, and I think overly caught up in the playing time during the games. You know, like of course that's significant, but it's not the most important thing. I don't think when you're 16, 17, like it's a factor, but it's not the most important thing. Like how much time are you getting away from the rink? How much access do you have to ice? Who is the coaching staff that you're around? What are the players like that you're around, right? Like there's some other factors there that people gotta understand too. I think that are important parts, because if you're somewhere where you don't have access to ice, the coaching staff is very minimal. You might be the star of your team for the games that you play, but really no one's pushing you. No one's getting you better. You're not really expanding, and the development's kind of on your shoulders. I'm not sure if that's the best spot as playing like a 9-10 forward in junior A, and maybe the next year, now you're in the program, the coaches know you, you've been in the environment, you're going to feel that much more comfortable the next year and play a bigger role in that team. Like I do think there is times where it's like, you know what, if you can make a team, go make that team, But again, everyone's different, and no situation is the same, because whether you're going to go to Penticton, or that was a decision I made when I was 15, right? I had the choice of playing at home in Vernon. Mel Liss at the time was the owner. He said I'd have a spot on that team if I came to camp. Now 15's young to play in that league, and I just was like, you know what? I know what they do there. Like they all they want to do is win every single year, and they bring in guys in the second half of the year that are 20 years old all the time, and I just kind of had a feeling that I just didn't want to be a part of that scenario. So I went to Penticton, which had a way different vibe. Like they had Paul Correa there, and they were good, but it wasn't. At that time, they weren't the same level as Vernon, right? They were just, they were just scrapping it out. They were doing their thing. Gary Davidson said, "Hey, I'm going to play a lot." I believed him, and we decided to go there. So for me, it wasn't, you have to consider the environments you're able to go into, right? And what's the best fit for you, and what are they, that trust again, do you have that trust? And if you do, rock and roll, right?
Yeah. And that's a great point. You can't discount the relationship you have with the coaching staff. And if they're honest with you that, look, coming in here at 16, it's not going to be easy, and you might not play every night, but we're committed to you, well, then that changes that story, a little bit, right? It's the ones where they sell you a bill of goods, and you get there, and then you're not playing, and they're not really, so listen, I don't think there's a lot of bad programs out there, but there's definitely some good ones. And I think you need to really pay attention to what's the development plan. And that's something that I encourage families to ask, before you sign anywhere or commit to something, ask the question, what's the development plan for my son? And not, that doesn't mean, is he going to play power play? Is he going to be first line center? No, what's the development plan? What's practice look like? What does off ice look like? What does skills development look like? What does the culture look like? What's the plan?
Yeah.
And if you can get those answers and you're comfortable with it, absolutely go for it.
That's a great question. Great questions to ask, because like you said, there are some programs. London Knights is a great example of like guys that have 16-year-olds on that team that you don't even know that they're even on the team, because they're healthy scratches, are not around, but they're around this juggernaut of a development scenario. And then they come in at 17 years old, and all of a sudden they're first round draft picks to the NHL. And there's other examples of that, even the NHL level. Like Detroit has been a great producer of their prospects, because they commit to developing them, right? So there is programs that have a track record, and I encourage parents to look at that. Like, look at the 16-year-olds that played there. Look at the 17s that are they still there at 19? Do they get let go, right? Because you can do a little digging, and it's not hard to find, right? Are they a part of the solution or not, right? And I think that's the thing, because you can be a 16, 17-year-old kid in that league, not get all the ice time that you think you want, or you might be getting somewhere else, but you're learning, and you're part of a development process that puts you in a position to succeed later on. And I think that trust that you build within an organization, if they want to develop their players instead of trying to find the next shiny gem all the time, that's part of the culture too, right? And there are programs that show that. So anyways, I don't think there's one way for one player, but you can make an educated choice as a family by asking the right questions, by looking into the program, who's offering what, and make an educated decision. That's that's the only thing you can do, right? You try the best you can and do the best you can.
I never begrudge a family if they choose not to be a Bulldog and go another route, as long as they feel they're educated, right? It's the question, it's the signings where you go, oh man, like, who's his advisor? Why did he do that? And was he educated? And at the end of the day, if I meet with a family and talk about all the pros and cons, and they decide against us, I can live with it as long as I know they're educated, right? So
Right.
that's something I think I took from CAA was, when you're on the agency side or the advisor side, you don't have any allegiance to a team. You could care less what program a player goes to. I mean, for me, always so interesting to watch the development path for Austin Matthews, and the decision to go play a season in Switzerland was really unheard of for a draft eligible player. And, for Austin, school wasn't really in the cards, and he belonged at that time to the Everett Silvertips, who, were under Kevin Constantine, and, offensively just didn't think it was a fit. And so with CAA, with the connections they had, Mark Crawford was in Switzerland at the time, and thought, well, maybe here's an opportunity to send Austin into a really uncharted waters, but, paid tremendous dividends for Austin. So, I mean, I think you just need to be educated and look at your options, and pros and cons lists are always a little cliche maybe, but they don't often lie if you start adding up what works for you and what doesn't.
When we're talking about recruiting players, what gets said, some of the lies that get told, and some of the promises that get made. What does it mean to make a commitment? And these guys that sign a commitment letter now. So, like I'm talking with guys, and they're like, "Oh, he's committed here," or, "I've been offered a commitment letter there." Like, what does that mean? Like legally, what does it mean? And what how do you handle those commitment letters now in your position that you are? Like, do you have so many that you agree to give out, or that you want to give out, or can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, really, it's my head coach and general manager, Joe Martin, who obviously heads up our recruiting, and Joe and I talk almost on a daily basis about what the plan is and who we're after and where do they slot in and things like that. I mean, for us in Junior A, we certainly take our commitments very seriously. Well, I shouldn't say Junior A. With the Alberni Valley Bulldogs, we take our commitments very seriously, and we don't commit to a player unless we feel that when the puck drops in the fall, they're going to be a part of our program. And that kind of goes back to where I touched on, where some teams do overcommit, where they will say, hey, we got a spot for you, come to camp, but they're saying that to a whole bunch of guys. And it's not just in the BCHL, it's right across, junior hockey. So that's where you have to be careful with what does that commitment mean, and what's the plan, and hope that you're putting yourself in a good spot. So, I mean, for us, when we have a player sign off on that, we're committed to them. So I can't speak for every program holding it to that same standard, but certainly for us in Port Alberni, it's a commitment is a commitment that you'll be with us, and we'll do our best. Joe Martin, his track record, Joe doesn't love making trades. It's just not his thing. Like, when he commits to a player, he wants to work with them and hopefully help them be a part of our solution, right? So, unfortunately, there is some ambiguity around what a commitment means in some places, but that's where it goes back to, do you get a good vibe, and do you get a good sense of what you're signing your son up for?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Good for you. What about, do you have your own personal philosophy on the commitment letters? Like, do you want to have, I don't know, how do I put this? Like, let's say you're returning guys. So you're looking at your team for next year already. Obviously, you're looking at it, your guys are returning. Now you have so many guys under commitment. Do you try and leave 3 or 4 spots open so it's a competitive camp, or do you want to have all the spots filled? How do you go about doing that, architecting a team?
Yeah, so I think, it varies from year to year, obviously. I mean, we're in a position with the Bulldogs this year where, we could theoretically return 16 or 17 players. Like, we could bring a lot of guys back. I think there's going to be a little bit of change, more than maybe we anticipated, just because you start to go through their process of meeting players and talking to schools and talking to agents, and you find out there's some players out there that maybe check a few more of the boxes for you about the culture and identity that you're trying to build. But, really, like, and this is sort of a carryover from my Penticton years, where, I like going into training camp with pretty much your team picked, and really bringing in some younger guys to give them the taste and give them the experience of playing some exhibition games and seeing how we operate, and then really sending them back to whether it's junior B or midget hockey, with the AP, promise to them that we're going to bring them up throughout the season and get them time with us and things like that. So, I think the days for the most part in the BCHL of, 40 or 50 man main camps and 10, 15 guys are slugging it out for, the final few spots. I think for the most part, that's really diminished. This really has become a recruiting heavy league in the sense where like every day right now you're seeing so-and-so's committed to Chilliwack, so-and-so's committed to Penticton, and they're coming from all over. It's not close to home necessarily, right? So I think teams primarily, much like college hockey, right? Like you have to, you almost mirror where your development path is. And for us, that's college hockey, and college hockey is a recruiting league. And so more and more and more, we've become that way as well, where we're meeting with families, meeting with players, watching a ton of tape, trying to talk to as many people as we can. And then, looking a player in the eye and saying, Jason, we want you to be a part of the Alberni Valley Bulldogs next season. Would you like to come? Yes, I would. Great.
Right.
Here you go. Right. And so
then for those players out there,
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but so for those players out there right now that don't have people dangling commitment letters in front of them, but are getting invites to these, camps, whether they be, the main camp, I don't think those are going out yet, but I mean, they're spring evaluation camps and this type of stuff. Like, they should really more have their sights set. Would that be, if I'm hearing from you, on finding the best midget development program or junior B program that they could find at that point? Because the going and surprising somebody in camp just doesn't really happen anymore.
It's a fewer and farther between story. So I think, look, this year's turned into complete upheaval with what's happening, unfortunately, in the world today and our inability to hold camps right now. I mean, we should be hosting our spring camp next week. And obviously that's going to be put on hold until Hockey Canada gives the all clear and allows us the opportunity to resume hockey activities and stuff. But so this year notwithstanding, I mean, really what I would always say to a player, you're going to probably get 17 or 18 spring camp invite letters. Some have a little more authenticity to them than others. Some are insert first last name here and hit send on the email. Others are, hey, we spent some time watching you at the Burnaby Winter Club this year or with the Okanagan Rockets, and we think that, you have potential to play. We'd like you to come to our camp. And so, I mean, you can certainly tell which is the form letter and which maybe has a little more thought put into it. But really, when you're thinking about it, I mean, first and foremost, spring camps cost money. They're an opportunity for us junior teams to make a little bit of money in the off season. There's no question of that. I don't hide behind that. But so you don't just want to keep handing off $250 to a whole bunch of places. Like, you want to put some real thought into, okay, is this a good spot for my son to go? And so I would always tell my players, especially in the Okanagan, is, maybe you go to 2 or 3 camps and that's it. Don't start running around going to 5, 6, 7 camps. Pick one in the Okanagan, go to one on the Lower Mainland, and maybe consider going to one team on the island and get yourself some experience. But also make sure you have a midget backup development plan in place as well. But I mean, spring camps still, don't get me wrong, spring camps are absolutely an opportunity to impress and give yourself an opportunity to get a main camp invite and, quite frankly, get a commitment. I mean, if you have a really good spring camp, it's not uncommon for a team to invite a player to come back and play with them that season. So
right, yeah, I was just going to say that.
You got to be a little strategic in it, right? You don't just want to start going anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's really a time to make your splash if you want to go. Be strategic with where you pick and go all in and maybe you turn some heads. That'd be your time to turn some heads if you're maybe in a program, coming from a program that's not as highly scouted, which actually gives me maybe a question on that as far as scouting at your level. I can't imagine you have a really deep set of scouts that are out there. Maybe you do. I'm not sure. Like, how many scouts would you say that you guys have either under contract or even just volunteering kind of? I think there's a few volunteer scouts at that level too, right?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it's the same thing at the major junior level as well. You have some dedicated paid scouts, and then you have, I think the old term is bird dogs, around the rinks throughout Western Canada, calling in and saying, hey, I saw a kid, maybe you guys should look at him. And so, I think that philosophy really varies from team to team, Jason. I mean, for us in Port Alberni, we've got a couple guys that we really know and trust, and really listen to their advice. But for the most part, for us, it goes back to relationships. I mean, we're in constant contact with the the prep schools, the midget teams, the colleges in the States, who, like, our league's really fortunate, I guess, in the sense where, our phone rings an awful lot, whether it's colleges saying, hey, we got a player leaving U.S. prep school. He needs a year of junior. Maybe the USHL isn't the best fit for him. Do you guys think maybe you have a spot for him? And then so that conversation leads to, let me get back to you, fire up Hockey TV, and you spend a few hours watching some games and some clips, and make a decision on whether you think that, young man can be a part of your team. And then you start having phone calls and conversations with families. And so I think a lot of times at our level, the scouting is almost sort of less important because of the relationship with coaches. I mean, I have, the ability, and certainly Joe Martin has the ability to pick up the phone and have a real good talk with a lot of programs about, hey, who do you have this year? Who stands out as a guy who might be able to make the jump next year? And we get some real honest feedback. And so then you start to develop a plan from there, saying, okay, maybe these are the 5 guys in midget hockey we got to watch this year, and decide on whether they can make the jump or be a part of our program. So
I find that part interesting. We could have I'm sure we could talk another hour just on that, because like, with anywhere, the top guys are the top guys, and everyone in the world knows who they are. Right. And everyone wants them and everything else. But I think like how you build a program is to identify the guys that can maybe make a difference that not everybody's looking at. And I mean, and that's where you really show your value as a scout, because it's like, yeah, these guys can contribute, and also they're not getting talked to by everyone under the sun. And so now, you become a really good option for them. And in saying that, like, there's a lot of places to watch kids now, right? I mean, you have the Elite 15s, you got the major midget programs, you got the zone teams, you got the academy programs. Like how do you deal with that from a team perspective? Meaning, like, how wide of a net do you cast, and where do you guys like to shop, I guess?
So, I mean, when it comes to the U.S., I mean, certainly you're relying on your relationships with the colleges and some of the key programs in the U.S. to get the feedback. And let's not, kid ourselves. Agents and advisors play a big part in this as well. Like, they shop their players and certainly do their best to get their player front and center on some teams' radars and things like that, Jason. But, when you cast that wide net, I mean, it sounds daunting, but quite honestly, it's a pretty small pool when you really get down to it. There's teams year in and year out that manufacture players, and and if they don't have those players, they're usually playing against those players, so they can give you a pretty honest answer. I mean, I've been tight for years with the OHA program with Andy Oakes and Dixon Ward and Penticton, and those guys have been invaluable over the years as well, just saying, hey, what do you think of this player at the Burnaby Winter Club? And what do you think of this player at Delta? And, you get some real honest feedback. And so once you kind of, I think like everything in life is you have a tight circle of people you really trust. And if they all start saying, John Smith's the player you might want to look at, then you start to think, okay, maybe John Smith's the player I want to look at. And then you go down that road of having conversations with families and players, and then kind of seeing, it's kind of funny in a lot of ways. It's not a lot different than dating, like, hey, you got to meet my friend. And then you start to see whether you got anything in common and if it might be a fit or not, right?
Right.
A lot of times it's not.
Well, and again, there you go. I mean, when I'm talking to players, and that's who I'm talking more directly to, and with the parents about questions about where should we go, and everyone's worried about what program they go to, and get really anxious about it, to make sure they make the right choice. But at the end of the day, like you said, you're going to get found. Like, you're going to get found. Like, if you're playing anywhere that, that has any type of credibility at all, I mean, like, if you do a good job, you're going to get found, because somebody who knows somebody who wants to tell a story, and people want to find people too. That's the thing that people forget, right? If you can find that diamond in the rough playing Joe Blow, middle of, BC somewhere, and that guy turns out to be a player, then somebody makes you make somebody feel good about themselves for finding that player. Like, you're going to get found, right? Like just go do it. We get so wound up in where to go. And of course there is factories, right? There is places that you can be, and that, there's areas that get watched, but again, you are going to get there. You're going to be able to find an opportunity, and people can't go too crazy come fall time if they don't make that one team or they don't get quite the right spot. It's hockey's a small world, and it's not that hard to find, guys.
No, it's not. And the other thing I always say about that as well is it's not nearly as political as people think it is. I think a lot of times you hear that, oh, my son didn't get a chance because of X, Y, or Z. The reality is coaches are paid to win hockey games. And if they think there's a player out there that can help them win, there's not a lot of other circumstances that go into that decision. If they can help a coach win, and that's where I say, it becomes a business, right? At the end of the day, I paid Joe Martin to run my program, and he's got to do his best possible job to ultimately win hockey games. And that's, let's face it, that's the measuring stick of most programs, is whether you have success and you're moving guys on. So there's not a lot political that goes into it. If you can help a team win, you're going to have an opportunity to play. And if somebody feels that you can't help them win, there's a reason for it, and it's not because they don't like your shirt.
Gotcha. Yeah, 100%. Which is interesting. I know you're really proud of the coach that you found there, and the GM to fill that role. He has a great track record there. I believe he was in Merritt, correct? But before you guys, so built a really good program there in Merritt. You were able to hire him. How did that process go? And was that your decision at the end of the day? Who was hired?
Yeah, so it's really a funny story, and Joe's well aware of it, so I'm not afraid to tell it. But Joe, I didn't know he was an option, so I was well down the road with another coach who I was really excited about. And one day, I got a call, and Joe said, "Well, my contract is up in Merritt. Is there, where are you at?" And I said, "Geez, if I had any idea, it probably would have been my first call, but I think I'm too far down the road with this guy. Like, I feel awful at this point to call this coach that I've been talking with for weeks and tell him I'm going another direction. Like, I'm sorry to say, I just don't think the timing is going to work." And he said, I get it, I understand. And I said, but hey, stranger things in life have happened. If anything changes, I'll give you a call back. And all of a sudden, that other coach went really quiet on me, and I couldn't get a call back, couldn't get a text back. And finally, I got a call from him one day saying, "Hey, man, really sorry to do this to you, but I'm going to go to another program." And I said, "Yeah, no problem. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye." He picked the phone up right away and called Joe and said, "Do you want to do this?" And he said, "Yeah, let's do this." So, a little more in depth to that. We had some really long discussion, but I had a front row seat in Penticton for a lot of years watching Merritt come in, and we had some real tough playoff battles with them. And I just really admire Joe as a person and the way he builds his teams. And, this year, I guess maybe more than ever, you started hearing the term old school coaches versus new school coaches. And, some coaches found themselves in some hot water for the way they treated players and stuff. And that was just something that I never have to worry about with Joe. And it goes back to that recruiting principle that I have with a family, being able to look them in the eye and say, your son's safe coming here, and we're going to put him in a good spot, and he's going to have a chance to become a better hockey player. And Joe's certainly demonstrated the ability to do that. He's had a lot of success with Hockey Canada. He was the head coach for Team Canada West at the World Junior A Challenge this year. And, I know the tournament didn't go quite the way he wanted it to, but, for him to be a part of that Hockey Canada program, you just learned so much, like I did with Team Pacific years ago before that. But he just checked so many boxes for me. And at the end of the day, I got to work with him every day, right? I live in Victoria, basically, and the team's 2.5 hours away in Port Alberni. So my business is here in Victoria. So I'm not maybe quite as hands-on as I'm used to being. And so I really have to trust that Joe's doing the job that I've hired him to do. And I do in spades. I put my head on my pillow every night and feel real good about the hands my team is in right now, and I just try to lend support where I can. And so it's been fun during this little pandemic here, being stuck at home. We've jumped on a bunch of recruiting calls together and kind of reignited my fire a little bit to be involved in that again. So,
right.
Yeah, but no, Joe does a tremendous job, and well connected with the schools. And really, that's what it boils down to at our level is, do the schools trust you to recommend players to go there, and the schools trust you to take your players. And for Joe, that's a resounding yes on both sides.
Nice. Nice. How does just for the coaches out there, so I mean, without having that track record, how would a new coach get hired into that league if they, I mean, maybe I guess if they played university hockey would obviously have helped.
Sure.
If they had some type of connections would help. But like if you've never been in that league, how would you go about getting a job?
Again, I hope I don't embarrass him by telling this story, but Brandon Shaw's our assistant coach, and he worked with Joe in Marist, and Shaw's from back east in Ontario, and kind of climbed the ladder of minor hockey and junior C in Ontario, and he kept harassing Joe and Merritt like, hey, I just want a chance to come out here, and sometimes the budgets for assistant coaches aren't quite where they need to be, and the credit to Shazi, he drove out on his own dime and got a job where he was working nights at a hotel in Merritt and coaching the team during the day to make ends meet. And I look back to like my time with the Okanagan Rockets. I did that for chicken wings, basically. I got to buy myself a couple meals on the road. But as I said, I sold radio on the side and dreamed of the day where I could have a full-time job, right? And so there's a great expression I've heard in today's world with social media and everything else that everyone wants a picture at the finish line, but nobody wants to run the race. And that really is something that I truly believe in, that if you want something, put in the time and hone your craft and do it for free and just do it with a smile on your face and don't ask for anything, and the opportunities are going to come. I didn't ask for a dime when I was with the Rockets, and Brandon Shaw is a great example of a young man who wants to be a hockey coach. And record this today, Brandon Shaw will be a head coach in junior hockey at some point. He's only 24 years old, but his day will come. But it's the time and the sacrifice that you put in to sort of learn your craft that gets you to where you want to be. There's just so many people who want the immediate gratification and don't want to put in the time that I just don't have a lot of time for. So I mean, we're lucky that I find I've always been surrounded by really good people, and I think maybe you mirror what you have in yourself, and you attract those sort of people, maybe, right? But that would be my advice: is you just got to find a way to get your foot in the door. And if it's a minor hockey team with a Bantam team or a midget team, just push pucks. Like that's how it starts. So many times was what you did with us. Like you decided that, hey, I'm just going to give up some time and come help these kids. And if it's because you have a playing experience and you can teach from that aspect, great. If it's because you have a passion for it and you're book smart and you've watched other coaches and now you want to apply what you've learned, great. Just put in the time and the results will come if that's what you really want to do.
No, I love that. I think that's a great message to end on, and especially just for players, run the race, right? Like do the work, put in the work, fall in love with the process of getting better. It's one thing I talk about all the time. It's everyone wants that right now, right? And parents want it right now too. Like they want the explanation of why their kid missed one shift at the end of the game. And it's like, that's the good stuff. Like it really is. Like those little bumps in the road, those little times of adversity is when you figure yourself out and how much you really want it, how much you really want to be a player and what you're willing to do to get on the ice. And same thing with the coaches and everything else, as you say, don't be afraid to run the race. So, I mean, I really love that. You're a testament to that too, Dave. I love your story. I think it's awesome. I really appreciate the time you spent here today, and best of luck to the Alberni Bulldogs next year. I know you're going to just keep getting rolling and incorporating what you're talking about through here, that authenticity, that accountability, the integrity, hiring good people around you. I'm sure there's going to be nothing but great success for that program in the future. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate the chance to chat with you, and good luck with everything. You're doing a great job.
Awesome. Thanks, man. All right. Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed that interview. What a great perspective and what a great story. To hear Dave's story about putting in the work, being passionate about something, committing to a process and putting tools in your toolbox and building your network and just doing the right thing by people, and you'll get rewarded. His own personal story is amazing, and all the takeaways, all the great little nuggets that he was able to offer us there, not only if you're a player or if you're even a parent, about asking the right questions, right? About taking accountability for where you're going to go and where you're going to end up. And just by being consistent, right? Those personal standards, not the standards that he talked about as a team, and then the standards that you can apply to yourself as an individual. And all the insights about being a player and about commitment letters and where to go and how to get there, and what the right path is for you personally and how you should approach that path. There's just so much good stuff there. I really enjoyed the interview. I thought that there was a lot of great takeaways, a lot of cool new perspectives, and a lot of things that should help you guys out there on your own personal journey. So once again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening today. We have some more great guests coming up. I'll keep them coming, and I really appreciate your support. Make sure you talk about this within your community, share it, like it, subscribe, leave a review if you have the time. I know it doesn't take long, but all that stuff gets it in front of more people, and that's something that not only will I appreciate, but those of you who get exposed to it also appreciate it. Nothing but good things. I appreciate all the reviews and all the feedback about what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast, and obviously the more information that can get out, the better. So make the most of this time here during this COVID-19 crisis, and I hope that you're learning to love your family and learning to slow down and learning to appreciate some of the finer points in life. I know we are here as a family, and we'll keep trying to give you good contact here at Up My Hockey. Thanks. Stay safe.